the blind Alpha King whispered when the bastard Omega fell into his lap, and he could see again. Prologue. Nadia was falling. The world tilted, her foot catching on something she never saw, and suddenly the heavy basket of linens flew from her arms as she tumbled forward through the open doorway. She had just enough time to think, I'm going to hit the floor, and Lady Celine will punish me, before strong arms caught her. Warm, solid, powerful arms that wrapped around her instinctively, pulling her against a chest that smelled of cedar and winter frost. Her heart hammered as she tried to process what had just happened. She'd fallen, but not onto stone. She'd fallen onto someone, onto a man. I can see you. The voice was deep, rough, filled with wonder and impossibility. It rumbled through the chest her cheek was pressed against, and Nadia's head jerked up in shock. Silver eyes stared down at her. Not gray, but pure luminous silver, like moonlight given form. They were wide with disbelief, tracking across her face as if memorizing every detail. Her storm-gray eyes, her silver blonde hair falling loose from its braid, the shock written across her features. You, he whispered again, and one hand came up to cup her face with devastating gentleness. I can see you. After 3 years of darkness, I can see again, and you're the first thing my eyes have witnessed. 3 years of darkness? That meant, Your Majesty. A horrified shriek came from behind them. I am so deeply sorry. This stupid Omega fell. I don't know how. Your Majesty. The words hit Nadia like ice water. She was sprawled across the lap of the Alpha King, the King Lucien who'd been cursed blind 3 years ago, the most powerful wolf in 5 kingdoms. And she, a bastard servant, worthless and invisible, had just crashed into him like a clumsy child. She tried to scramble away, terror flooding her veins. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. But his arms tightened around her, keeping her in place. Those newly awakened silver eyes never left her face, and there was something in them that made her breath catch, something that looked almost like recognition, like destiny. Don't move, he said, and his voice carried a command that made her freeze instantly. Not yet. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, so gentle it made her want to cry. And when he spoke again, the words seemed to echo through the room with a weight that felt magical, binding, inevitable. You are mine. Nadia didn't understand. Didn't understand how her fall had restored his sight. Didn't understand why he was looking at her as if she were something precious instead of something broken. She only knew that in the span of heartbeats, her entire world had shattered and reformed into something utterly terrifying and completely impossible. The blind king could see again, and somehow, impossibly, he was claiming her. If you love intense stories about wolves with destiny and twists and turns, subscribe to the channel now. We post videos every day, so subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any episodes. How about we get to know each other better? I'm Maggie Reed, author of the stories, and you? Comment below with your name and which city you're watching from. Chapter 1. The castle courtyard smelled of rain and wet stone, and Nadia could feel every cobblestone through the worn soles of her shoes as she hurried across the open space. Her arms ached from carrying the heavy basket of linens, but she didn't dare slow down. Not here. Not in the heart of the northern court, where even the servants had higher status than she did. Because Nadia wasn't just a servant. She was a bastard. An Omega born from a forbidden union between a beta maid and an unknown alpha who'd vanished before her birth. No family name, no pack ties, no protection beyond the bare minimum the court provided in exchange for her labor. She kept her eyes down as she walked, a habit she'd learned early. Looking up meant catching someone's attention, and attention meant trouble. The court wolves didn't like bastards. Especially not Omega bastards who reminded them that even in their perfect, ordered world, mistakes happened. Watch where you're going! Nadia stumbled back just in time to avoid colliding with a tall beta male carrying a stack of parchments. Her basket tilted, and she grabbed at it desperately, managing to keep the clean linens from spilling onto the muddy ground. I'm sorry, she whispered, head bowing even lower. I didn't see you. I'm sorry. The beta barely glanced at her before continuing on his way, muttering something about useless omegas under his breath. Nadia stood frozen for a moment, heart hammering against her ribs, before forcing her feet to move again. She needed to reach the east wing before the afternoon bell rang. Lady Celine had requested fresh linens for the guest chambers, and Lady Celine was not a woman who tolerated delays. As one of the king's cousins, she wielded enough influence to make Nadia's already difficult life unbearable if displeased. The east wing rose before her, a section of the castle that Nadia rarely entered. This was where the royal family and their highest-ranking guests resided. The corridors here were wider, the tapestries richer, the very air seeming to carry more weight. Nadia climbed the servants' staircase, her legs burning by the time she reached the third floor. She paused at the top to catch her breath, leaning against the cool stone wall for just a moment. Through a nearby window, she could see the formal gardens below, where several court ladies strolled with their attendants. Their laughter drifted up, bright and carefree. She wondered sometimes what that felt like. To walk without fear. To laugh without worrying that someone would punish you for the sound. A sharp voice cut through her thoughts. "You! Omega!" Nadia turned to find Lady Celine herself striding down the corridor, accompanied by two other noble ladies whose names Nadia didn't know. All three wore gowns that probably cost more than Nadia would earn in her entire lifetime. "You're late," Lady Celine said, her ice-blue eyes narrowing. "I requested those linens an hour ago." "I apologize, my lady," Nadia said quickly, dropping into a curtsy as best she could while holding the heavy basket. "There was a delay in the laundry and I came as soon as—" "I don't care about excuses." Lady Celine stepped closer and Nadia caught the scent of expensive perfume. "Do you know what happens to servants who can't perform their duties adequately?" Nadia's throat went dry. "No, my lady. They get reassigned." The way Lady Celine said it made the word sound like a threat. "To less pleasant positions. The kennels, perhaps. Or the stables. Would you like that, little bastard? Sleeping with the animals where you belong?" The other ladies tittered, and Nadia felt heat rush to her face. But she kept her eyes down, kept her voice level. "No, my lady. I'll do better." "See that you do." Lady Celine gestured impatiently. "The chambers are this way, and don't drop anything. Those linens are worth more than you are." Nadia followed the three ladies down the corridor, her arms trembling now from more than just the weight of the basket. She'd learned long ago not to let their words pierce too deep. But some days it was harder than others. Some days she wondered why she stayed here, why she endured this treatment. But the answer was always the same. Because there was nowhere else to go. A bastard Omega with no pack would be prey outside these walls. At least here, she had a roof and regular meals, even if both came with a side of constant humiliation. They reached a set of ornate double doors, and Lady Celine pushed them open to reveal a guest chamber that took Nadia's breath away. The room was enormous, with a canopied bed large enough for 4 people, windows draped in silk, and a fireplace big enough for her to stand in. Wealth and power emanated from every surface. "Well?" Lady Celine snapped. "Don't just stand there gaping. Make the bed." Nadia hurried forward, setting her basket down and beginning to work. She stripped away the old linens efficiently, having done this task hundreds of times before. Her hands moved automatically while her mind wandered. A small mercy in moments like these. She was reaching across the massive bed to tuck in the far corner of the fitted sheet when it happened. Her foot caught on something, maybe a fold in the rug, maybe nothing at all. She felt herself falling forward, arms windmilling uselessly, the world tilting sideways. She heard Lady Celine's sharp gasp, heard her own startled cry. And then she was tumbling through the open doorway she hadn't noticed, the one that connected this guest chamber to another room. She had just enough time to think, "I'm going to hit the floor," before she landed. Except she didn't land on the floor. She landed on something warm and solid. Someone. Strong arms caught her instinctively, and Nadia found herself sprawled across a lap, her face pressed against a chest that smelled of cedar and winter frost. She was too shocked to move, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. And then she heard a voice. Deep, rough, filled with something that sounded like wonder and impossibility all at once. "I can see you." Nadia's head jerked up, and for the first time, she looked at the person she'd fallen onto. He was the most beautiful man she'd ever seen. Dark hair fell across a face of sharp angles and aristocratic features, broad shoulders and a powerful frame that even sitting down radiated strength. He wore simple clothes, surprisingly informal for someone who was clearly high-ranking. But none of that was what made Nadia's breath catch in her throat. It was his eyes. They were silver, bright and luminous as moonlight, and they were staring directly at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. There was shock in those eyes, disbelief, and something else, something that looked almost like recognition. "You," he said again, and one of his hands came up to touch her face, fingers gentle against her cheek. "I can see you. After 3 years of darkness, I can see again. And you're the first thing my eyes have witnessed." Nadia's mind reeled. 3 years of darkness? That meant, "Your Majesty!" Lady Celine's horrified shriek came from behind them. "I am so deeply sorry, this stupid Omega. She fell. I don't know how. Please forgive this intrusion. Your Majesty." The words hit Nadia like a physical blow. This was the king. The Alpha King Lucien, ruler of the Northern Court. And she, a bastard Omega, had just fallen directly into his lap. She tried to scramble away, terror flooding through her veins. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please forgive me." But the king's arms tightened around her, not painfully but firmly, keeping her in place. His silver eyes never left her face. "Don't," he said, and there was something almost desperate in his voice. "Don't move. Not yet." "Your Majesty," another voice said, this one male and measured. A beta man in formal attire had appeared, his expression a mix of shock and what looked like barely contained hope. "Can you truly see? After the curse took your sight 3 years ago, the healers said—" "I can see," the king said, and his voice was stronger now, more certain. "As clearly as I ever did before the curse struck. And it happened the moment this woman fell into my arms." Silence filled the room, heavy and profound. Nadia could hear her own heart thundering in her ears. This wasn't possible. Curses didn't just break because someone fell on you. That wasn't how magic worked. And yet the king was looking at her, truly seeing her, his silver eyes tracking every detail of her face as if memorizing it. "Who are you?" he asked softly. Nadia's voice came out as barely a whisper. "Nadia, Your Majesty. I'm no one. Just a servant." Something flickered across his face. "Just a servant," he repeated. "A servant who broke a curse that the most powerful healers and mages in 5 kingdoms couldn't touch." His hand was still on her face, thumb brushing lightly across her cheekbone. "I don't think you're just anything." "Your Majesty," Lady Celine interjected, her voice tight with barely concealed anger. "This Omega is a bastard. She has no bloodline, no family. Whatever happened here must be a coincidence. Perhaps the curse was simply ready to break. It broke the instant she touched me," the king interrupted, his eyes finally leaving Nadia's face to fix on his cousin with an intensity that made even the noblewoman step back. "And I will not hear you diminish what just occurred." He looked back at Nadia, and she saw something shift in his expression. A decision being made. "You are mine," he said, and the words seemed to echo through the room with a weight that felt almost magical. "From this moment forward, you are under my personal protection. No one may harm you, command you, or disrespect you. You will move your belongings to the royal wing by nightfall." "But Your Majesty," the beta man protested gently, "we don't yet understand what caused your sight to return. Perhaps we should consult the healers, have them examine both of you." "We will," the king agreed. "But first, I will ensure this woman's safety. If she is the key to breaking my curse, then she is the most valuable person in this kingdom." His arms were still around Nadia, and she realized with a jolt that she could feel his heartbeat through his chest, steady and strong. "And I will not risk losing whatever magic brought her to me." Nadia tried to process his words, but her mind felt slow, overwhelmed. This morning she'd been a nobody, a bastard servant that everyone looked through rather than at. And now the king was calling her his, offering protection, moving her to the royal wing. It had to be a dream, or a mistake. Any moment now she would wake up in her narrow cot in the servants' quarters, and this would all evaporate like morning mist. But the king's hand on her face felt real. The warmth of his body against hers felt real. And when he looked at her with those newly healed silver eyes, the wonder and intensity she saw there felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. Nadia nodded, not trusting her voice. The king helped her to her feet, rising with her, and she realized he was even taller than she'd thought. He towered over her, broad and powerful, and yet there was gentleness in the way he steadied her. "Lord Benedict," the king said to the beta man, "please escort Nadia to the royal wing and see that she's given appropriate chambers. Summon the healers as well. I want both of us examined immediately." "Of course, Your Majesty." Lord Benedict bowed, then offered his arm to Nadia. "My lady, if you'll come with me?" "My lady." No one had ever called her that before. Nadia looked back at the king one more time and found him still watching her. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite name, something that made her feel like the ground had shifted beneath her feet and would never be quite solid again. "Go," he said softly. "But know this, Nadia, you and I are not finished. Whatever brought you to me, whatever magic lives between us, we will discover it together." As Lord Benedict led her from the room, Nadia glanced back one final time. The king stood in the center of his chamber, silver eyes fixed on her retreating form, one hand raised as if he wanted to call her back. And in that moment, Nadia understood with absolute certainty that her life had just changed forever. She just didn't know if it was for better or worse. Chapter 2. The royal wing was a world Nadia had never seen before. She'd cleaned chambers in the east and west wings hundreds of times, but those were for guests and extended family. The royal wing, where the king himself resided along with his closest advisors and most trusted guards, was forbidden territory for someone of her rank. Even the head housekeeper rarely ventured here. Now, Lord Benedict was guiding her through corridors lined with portraits of past kings and queens, their painted eyes seeming to follow her as she passed. The ceilings soared overhead, decorated with frescoes that must have taken years to complete. Every surface gleamed with polish. Every tapestry hung perfectly straight. Nadia felt distinctly out of place in her plain servant's dress, her hair escaping from its simple braid, her shoes leaving small muddy prints on the pristine floors. "The chambers prepared for you are here," Lord Benedict said, stopping before a door carved with an intricate pattern of wolves and moon phases. "They belong to the king's late mother, the former queen consort. They've been kept maintained but unoccupied since her passing 5 years ago." He opened the door, and Nadia's breath caught. The suite was easily 3 times the size of the entire servants' dormitory where she'd been sleeping. A sitting room opened before her, furnished with plush chairs arranged around a fireplace already burning cheerfully. Through an archway, she could see a bedroom with a canopied bed draped in midnight blue silk. Another door revealed a private bathing chamber with a tub large enough for her to fully stretch out in. "This can't be right," Nadia whispered. "These chambers are for someone important. A lady, not a bastard servant?" Lord Benedict finished gently. When Nadia flinched, he sighed. "My lady, I don't mean to be indelicate, but you must understand, your status changed the moment you restored the king's sight. Whether by magic, destiny, or pure chance, you've done what no one else in 3 years could accomplish." He gestured for her to enter, and Nadia did so on trembling legs. The carpet beneath her feet was so soft she almost stumbled. "The healers will arrive within the hour," Lord Benedict continued. "They'll want to examine you both, try to understand what occurred. In the meantime, I've sent for attendants to help you bathe and dress appropriately for meeting with the royal physicians." "Attendants?" Nadia's voice cracked. "I don't need—" "You do," he interrupted, but his tone was kind. "The king has declared you under his personal protection. which means you can no longer dress or act as a servant. The court will be watching you now, judging every move. We must present you appropriately. Anxiety knotted in Nadia's stomach. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Then you'll learn. Lord Benedict moved toward the door. I'll return shortly with the healers. Try not to worry, my lady. His Majesty would never have placed you under his protection if he intended you harm. After he left, Nadia stood in the center of the sitting room, slowly turning to take it all in. Everything was so beautiful it hurt to look at. She was afraid to touch anything, certain she would damage something priceless. She moved to the window and pulled back the heavy curtain. The view looked out over the northern mountains, their peaks still capped with snow even though summer approached. Birds wheeled in the distance, and far below she could see the royal stables and training grounds. From up here, the world looked different. Cleaner, more ordered. But Nadia didn't feel different. She still felt like a bastard Omega who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A knock sounded at the door, and before she could respond, it opened to admit 3 women. They were dressed as servants, but their uniforms were far finer than anything Nadia had worn. The eldest, a middle-aged beta with silver threading through her brown hair, curtsied. My lady, I'm Marie, the head attendant of the royal wing. His Majesty has asked us to assist you in preparing for the healer's examination. My lady. There it was again, the title that felt like a dress 3 sizes too large. I can bathe myself, Nadia said quietly. I don't need help. Marie's expression softened. I'm sure you can, my lady. But these are the king's orders. Please let us serve you. It's our honor. Nadia didn't miss the undercurrent in those words. These women might be servants, but they served in the royal wing. They had status, pride. Being asked to attend a bastard must rankle. But she was too overwhelmed to argue. She let them guide her to the bathing chamber, where they'd already drawn a hot bath perfumed with oils that smelled of lavender and something else she couldn't name. Steam rose from the water invitingly. The women helped her undress, and Nadia felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She'd bathed communally in the servants' quarters her whole life, but this felt different, more intimate, more exposing. When she sank into the hot water, though, a small sound of pleasure escaped her throat before she could stop it. She'd never bathed in anything warmer than lukewarm water. This felt like pure luxury. Marie worked on washing and conditioning her hair while the other attendants laid out clothes in the bedroom. You have beautiful hair, my lady, Marie said. Such an unusual shade. Almost silver in the light. My mother's hair, Nadia said quietly. One of the only things I know about her. She died when I was an infant. I'm sorry for your loss. Marie's hands were gentle as she worked soap through Nadia's long locks. And your father? Unknown. The word came out flat, matter of fact. She'd long ago stopped feeling pain over it. An alpha who didn't stay around to claim his mistake. Marie was quiet for a moment. Then, perhaps not a mistake. Perhaps destiny. Nadia wanted to laugh, but it would have come out bitter. Destiny doesn't visit bastards. Destiny, Marie said firmly, visits whomever it chooses. And today, it brought you to the king. After the bath, the attendants dressed Nadia in a gown of soft gray silk that felt like water against her skin. It was simple compared to what the noble ladies wore, but to Nadia, it might as well have been spun from starlight. They braided her hair in an elegant style she'd never have managed alone. And when Marie held up a mirror, Nadia barely recognized her reflection. She looked like someone important, like someone who belonged in these chambers. The illusion she knew would shatter the moment she opened her mouth and everyone remembered what she really was. Another knock, and Lord Benedict entered with 3 individuals wearing the white robes of royal healers. The eldest, a woman with iron gray hair and sharp green eyes, studied Nadia with undisguised curiosity. So, you're the miracle worker, she said without preamble. I'm Healer Morgana, chief of the King's Medical Council. These are my apprentices, Healer Finn and Healer Sasha. We need to examine you. I don't know what happened, Nadia said quickly. I fell, and we'll determine what happened. Morgana gestured to a chair. Sit. For the next hour, The healers put Nadia through a battery of tests. They checked her pulse, looked into her eyes, had her perform simple magical exercises to test for latent power. They drew blood, collected hair samples, even had her breathe onto a specially treated crystal that apparently revealed magical essence. Through it all, Nadia cooperated numbly. She knew what they would find. Nothing. She had no magic, no special gifts. She was just an Omega who'd tripped at precisely the wrong moment. Or the right moment, depending on how you looked at it. Finally, Morgana stepped back, frowning at her notes. This makes no sense. What doesn't? Lord Benedict asked. She's completely ordinary. Morgana's tone made it clear she'd hoped for a different result. No latent magical ability. No special bloodline markers. Her Omega designation is standard, her health unremarkable. There's absolutely nothing about her that should have been able to break a curse as powerful as the one afflicting His Majesty. Nadia had expected this, but hearing it stated so baldly still stung. Even magic didn't want her. Perhaps the curse simply ran its course, one of the younger healers suggested. 3 years is... The curse was designed to last until the caster's death, or until true love's intervention. Morgana interrupted. Those were the parameters we identified. The witch who cast it died 2 years ago, so that wasn't the trigger. Which leaves... She trailed off, looking at Nadia with new speculation. True love? Lord Benedict finished. You think this woman is the king's true mate? I think it's one possibility we can't ignore. Morgana began packing her instruments. The curse was specific. It would lift only through genuine love's contact, not desire, not political alliance. Love. True, destined, fated love. Nadia's stomach lurched. That's impossible. I've never even met the king before today. Fated mates don't require previous meetings, Morgana said. The bond exists outside time and circumstance. Some wolves know their mates immediately upon meeting. Others take longer to recognize the connection. But I'm a bastard, Nadia whispered. A nobody. Kings don't have bastards as fated mates. That's not how it works. Fate, Morgana said dryly, doesn't consult bloodlines before making matches. I've seen the most unlikely pairs turn out to be true mates. A princess and a stable hand. An alpha and a human. Why not a king and a bastard? She closed her bag with a decisive snap. I'll examine His Majesty next. But I strongly advise you, my lady, to consider the possibility that your meeting with the king was not an accident, and that whatever exists between you might be far more significant than either of you realizes. After the healers left, Nadia sank into one of the plush chairs, her mind reeling. Fated mates, true love. The word sounded like something from a fairy tale, not her actual life. She wasn't prepared for any of this. Wasn't equipped to handle being thrust into the king's world, into a situation where powerful people would be watching her every move. And she definitely wasn't prepared for the possibility that her destiny might be intertwined with a king who she'd met for all of 5 minutes. The sun was setting outside her window, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, when another knock came. Nadia called permission to enter, expecting Lord Benedict or perhaps Marie. Instead, the king himself walked through her door. He'd changed clothes since she last saw him, now wearing formal dark blue attire that emphasized his powerful build. His dark hair was pulled back from his face, showcasing those extraordinary silver eyes that tracked her as he entered. Nadia scrambled to her feet, dropping into the most respectful curtsy she could manage. Your Majesty, please don't. His voice was gentle. I didn't come here for formality. When she straightened, she found him studying her with the same intensity as before, as if he was trying to memorize every detail. You look different, he said finally. Beautiful in that gown, but also afraid. Are you afraid of me, Nadia? She considered lying, but something about those silver eyes made it impossible. I'm afraid of everything right now, Your Majesty. This morning I was a servant. Tonight I'm in the former queen's chambers, being told I might be your fated mate. Nothing makes sense anymore. No, he agreed. It doesn't. He moved closer, his movements surprisingly graceful for someone so large. May I sit? At her nod, he settled into the chair opposite hers. For a moment they simply looked at each other, and Nadia was struck by how surreal this was. The king of the northern court, sitting in comfortable silence with a bastard Omega, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "The healers told you their theory?" he asked. "About us being fated mates? Yes? And what do you think?" Nadia twisted her hands in her lap. "I think it sounds impossible. 3 days ago, I would have said regaining my sight was impossible." The king leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've been blind for 3 years, Nadia. 3 years of darkness, of depending on others for everything, of feeling helpless despite being the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. And then you fell into my arms, and suddenly I could see again." He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and took one of her hands in his. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a warrior despite his royal status. "The moment our skin touched, it was like lightning through my entire body," he said quietly. "Every nerve awakened, and then my vision returned in a rush of color and light that should have been blinding but wasn't. Do you know what I saw first?" Nadia shook her head mutely. "Your face. Your eyes, they're gray, like storm clouds. Your hair, falling around your shoulders in a silver cascade. Your expression, so shocked and frightened and beautiful it made my chest ache." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "If that's not fate, I don't know what is." "You don't know me," Nadia protested weakly. "How can you feel anything for a stranger?" "I could ask you the same question." The king's gaze was unwavering. "Because I see it in your eyes, Nadia. You feel this too. This pull between us. This recognition that goes beyond logic." She wanted to deny it, wanted to say he was mistaken, that she felt nothing, but it would have been a lie. Because the truth was, from the moment she'd looked into his silver eyes, something inside her had shifted. Something that felt like a door opening in a house she'd thought had no exits. Something that whispered him with a certainty that terrified her. "I'm a bastard," she said instead. "I have no family, no status, no value beyond the labor I can provide. Even if we are fated mates, the court will never accept me. Your advisors will fight it. The noble families will be outraged. And you," she pulled her hand from his, though it cost her to do it. "You deserve a queen who can help you rule. Not a burden who will only make everything harder." The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, and Nadia thought he was leaving. Thought she'd just talked him out of this insanity. Instead, he knelt before her chair, bringing their faces level. His hands cupped her face with aching gentleness. "Let me tell you what I see when I look at you," he said softly. "I see a woman who survived being orphaned and bastard-born in a court that treats both as unforgivable sins. I see someone who worked without complaint in a position that offered no hope and no future. I see strength and resilience and a quiet dignity that no amount of noble breeding can create." His forehead touched hers, and Nadia's breath hitched. "You are not a burden," he murmured. "You are the woman who gave me back my sight. And whether by fate or magic or sheer impossible chance, that makes you precious beyond measure. You don't have to do this," Nadia whispered. "Don't have to claim me or protect me. I can go back to—" "No," the word was absolute. "You're mine now, Nadia. I claimed you the moment you fell into my arms, and I'm not releasing that claim. The court can rage all they want. My advisors can counsel caution. I don't care." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "But I won't force you. If you truly want to leave, to go back to your old life, I'll arrange it. I'll provide you with resources, a new start somewhere safe. You'll never have to serve anyone again. And if I stay?" Something fierce and possessive flashed in his silver eyes. "If you stay, then we explore what this is between us. We give the fated mate bond a chance to grow, or to prove itself false. And regardless of whether we're truly destined for each other, I promise you'll be safe, protected, valued." Nadia's heart was racing so fast she thought it might burst from her chest. Every rational thought screamed that she should leave, should run from this impossible situation before it destroyed her. But a deeper voice, one that seemed to come from her very bones, whispered, "Stay." "I'll stay," she heard herself say. "For now, to see what happens." The smile that transformed the king's face was devastating. Joy and relief, and something that looked like hope all mixed together. He stood, pulling her up with him, and before she could process what was happening, he'd wrapped her in an embrace. Nadia stiffened in shock. Kings didn't hug bastard Omegas. This wasn't done. But then his warmth seeped into her, his scent, cedar and winter frost, filling her nose, and slowly, tentatively, she let herself relax into his hold. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair, "for staying, for giving us a chance." "I might regret this," Nadia said, her voice muffled against his chest. "You might." She could hear the smile in his voice. "But I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you don't." As the king held her there in the fading light, Nadia let herself imagine, just for a moment, that this could actually work, that somehow a bastard Omega and a blind Alpha King might find their happily ever after. It was a dangerous hope, but hope, she was learning, was a dangerous thing in general. And she'd just bet her entire future on it. Chapter 3. The morning light filtered through the heavy curtains of Nadia's chamber, casting golden patterns across the plush carpet she'd been too afraid to walk on barefoot the night before. She woke slowly, disoriented by the softness of the mattress beneath her, so different from the thin pallet she'd slept on for 23 years. For a confused moment, she thought she'd dreamed everything. The fall, the king, those silver eyes looking at her as if she were something precious. Then she saw the gray silk gown draped carefully over a chair, and reality crashed back. A knock sounded at her door, followed by Marie's voice. "My lady? May I enter?" "My lady." The title still felt wrong, like a coat meant for someone else. "Yes," Nadia called, pulling the blanket higher even though she was fully dressed in a nightgown the attendants had provided. Another luxury she'd never experienced, sleeping in something clean and soft instead of her day clothes. Marie entered with a breakfast tray that smelled of fresh bread and honey. Behind her came two younger maids carrying an armful of dresses in various colors. "His Majesty has requested your presence at the morning council meeting," Marie said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "It begins in 2 hours, which gives us time to prepare you properly." Nadia's stomach nodded. "The council meeting? But I don't have any place in the King's Council." "You do now." Marie's expression was kind but firm. "His Majesty announced last night that you would be attending all official meetings as his honored guest. The entire court is talking about it." Of course they were. Nadia could imagine the gossip spreading like wildfire through the castle's corridors. The bastard servant who'd somehow caught the king's attention. The speculation would be cruel. The assumptions worse. "What are they saying?" she asked quietly. Marie hesitated, then seemed to decide honesty was better than false comfort. "Some believe you used magic to bewitch His Majesty. Others think you're a spy from a rival kingdom. A few are suggesting you deliberately engineered your fall to gain his favor." Each accusation landed like a small blow. Nadia had expected suspicion, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. "And what do you believe?" she found herself asking. Marie met her eyes directly. "I believe I saw the king smile yesterday for the first time in 3 years. I believe he's been walking these halls like a ghost since the curse took his sight, going through the motions of ruling but with no light in him. And I believe that light returned the moment he looked at you." She moved to the window, pulling back the curtains fully to let in the morning sun. "Whatever you are to him, my lady, it's something good. Something he needs. The rest will sort itself out." After breakfast, the attendants helped Nadia dress in a gown of deep forest green that brought out the gray in her eyes. They styled her silver blonde hair in an elegant updo, leaving a few tendrils loose to frame her face. When Marie held up the mirror, Nadia barely recognized the refined woman staring back. "You look like a queen," one of the younger maids whispered, then clapped a hand over her mouth as if she'd said something forbidden. But Marie smiled. "She does indeed." The walk to the council chamber felt endless. Lord Benedict appeared to escort her, offering his arm with the same courtesy he'd shown the previous day. As they moved through the castle's corridors, Nadia felt the weight of every stare. Servants paused in their work to watch her pass. Guards tracked her movements with suspicious eyes, Nobles whispered behind their hands. She kept her head high through sheer force of will, reminding herself that the king himself had claimed her. That had to count for something. The council chamber doors were massive things of carved oak depicting wolves and mountains. 2 guards stood at attention, opening the doors as Lord Benedict approached. "Lady Nadia," he announced, and the title echoed through the large room beyond. The chamber was circular, with tall windows letting in streams of sunlight. A round table dominated the center, and seated around it were a dozen individuals who all turned to stare at Nadia with varying degrees of surprise, curiosity, and hostility. And at the head of the table, silver eyes finding hers immediately, sat the king. He stood as she entered, and the rest of the council rose with him. "Nadia," he said, and his voice held warmth that sent heat to her cheeks. "Come, sit beside me." There was an empty chair to his right, the place of honor, typically reserved for the queen or the king's most trusted advisor. Murmurs rippled around the table as Nadia crossed the room on unsteady legs. The king held the chair for her himself, another gesture that made the murmurs grow louder. As she sat, his hand brushed her shoulder briefly, a touch so light it might have been accidental, but the warmth that spread through her told her it was anything but. Once everyone was seated again, the king addressed the council. "I'm sure you all have questions about yesterday's events. Let me address them plainly." His silver gaze swept the table. 3 years ago, a curse stole my sight. Yesterday, this woman restored it through means we don't yet fully understand. That makes her both valuable and vulnerable, which is why I've placed her under my personal protection. Your Majesty?" An older man with iron-gray hair spoke up. Nadia recognized him from court gossip, Lord Aldrich, the king's chief military advisor. "With all respect, we know nothing about this woman. Her background, her loyalties, her intentions. Placing her in a position of such proximity could be dangerous. I'm aware of the risks," the king said calmly, "which is why I want her where I can protect her. There will be those who see her as a threat or a tool to be used. I won't allow either." A woman in elaborate robes, Counselor Vera, Nadia remembered, the court's master of trade, leaned forward. "But Your Majesty, the precedent this sets. A servant, and a bastard at that, given access to the highest levels of government? The noble families will be outraged." "Then let them be outraged." The king's tone hardened. "I didn't survive 3 years of blindness to cower before noble sensibilities. Nadia stays. That's not open for debate." Silence fell, tense and uncomfortable. Nadia wanted to sink through the floor. Every eye was on her, judging, calculating, resenting. Then Lady Celine's voice cut through the quiet. "Perhaps we should consider what the noble's outrage might cost us, nephew." She sat across from Nadia, her ice blue eyes cold. "You need their support, their armies, their resources. Alienating them over a servant seems unwise." The king's jaw tightened, and Nadia felt power ripple through the room. His wolf, close to the surface. "Careful, cousin. That servant, as you call her, is the reason I can see your face right now. Show some gratitude." "I'm grateful for your restored sight," Lady Celine said, not backing down. "But that doesn't mean we should throw aside all protocol and tradition. There are proper ways to honor someone who's performed a service. Ways that don't involve elevating them beyond their station." Nadia found her voice before she could stop herself. "You're right." Everyone turned to stare at her. The king's eyes narrowed. "Nadia." "No, she's right," Nadia continued, even though her heart was racing. "I don't belong here. I don't understand politics or trade or military strategy. I don't know how to be anything other than what I've always been, and forcing the council to accept me will only create problems for everyone." She looked at the king, saw something that might have been hurt flash across his features. "You've been incredibly kind, Your Majesty. You've given me more in one day than I've had in my entire life. But maybe it would be better if I returned to the servants' quarters. I could continue to serve, just not like this." The king stood so abruptly his chair scraped against the stone floor. "Council dismissed. Everyone out. Now." "But Your Majesty," Lord Aldrich began. "Now." The single word carried such authority that the counselors scrambled to obey. Within moments, the chamber had emptied except for Nadia and the king. He paced to the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. Nadia remained in her chair, hands twisted in her lap, waiting for his anger. When he finally turned, though, his expression wasn't angry. It was devastated. "Is that truly what you want?" he asked quietly. "To go back to being invisible? To spend your life serving people who don't even see you as human?" "I don't know what I want," Nadia admitted. "Everything's happening so fast. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I'm sitting in a council meeting while nobles debate whether I'm a threat or a tool. It's overwhelming." The king crossed the room and knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "I know I'm asking too much. I know this isn't fair to you. But Nadia, please understand. I can't let you go back to that life. Not after seeing what it cost you. You don't know what my life cost me. Don't I?" His thumbs traced circles on the backs of her hands. "I saw your chamber in the servants' quarters. After you left yesterday, I went to collect your belongings. That tiny room with its thin pallet and cracked window. The few possessions you had, all of them worn and mended multiple times. The absence of anything personal. Anything that showed who you are beyond your labor." Nadia's throat tightened. She'd never thought about her room that way, but hearing it described made her realize how empty it had been, how empty she'd let herself become. "You've been surviving," the king said softly. "Not living, just enduring. And I can't send you back to that. I won't." "Then what do you want from me?" The question came out almost as a plea. "I want you to give this a real chance." He squeezed her hands gently, not just staying in the royal wing, but actually being here, learning, growing, discovering who you could be if you weren't constantly afraid. "I don't know how to not be afraid." "Then let me teach you." The king's silver eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Let me show you what it's like to be valued, protected, cherished. And if, after giving it an honest try, you still want to leave, I'll help you build a new life wherever you choose." It was a dangerous offer. Dangerous because part of her desperately wanted to accept it, wanted to believe she could be more than what she'd always been. "The council hates me," she said weakly. "The council will adjust, or be replaced. The court thinks I'm using magic to manipulate you. The court thinks many foolish things. I've never cared for their opinions before. I'm not starting now. Lady Celine called me a servant, and she's not wrong." "Lady Celine," the king said, and there was steel in his voice now, "will learn to show you respect or find herself reassigned to a remote estate far from court. I won't tolerate anyone disrespecting you, Nadia. Not even family." He rose, pulling her to her feet with him. His hands framed her face, and Nadia found herself drowning in those silver eyes that had been blind just yesterday. "You are not just a servant," he said firmly. "You're the woman who gave me back my sight. You're under my personal protection, and whether you believe it yet or not, you're important. To me, to this kingdom, to whatever destiny brought us together. I'm so afraid I'll disappoint you," Nadia whispered. "Impossible." He leaned down until their foreheads touched. "You've already exceeded every expectation simply by being yourself. Now I'm asking you to trust me, to trust this. Can you do that?" Nadia thought about her tiny room with its cracked window, about 23 years of bowing her head and making herself small, about a lifetime of being told she was less, wrong, unwanted, and then she thought about the king's smile yesterday when his sight returned, about the gentleness in his hands, about the way he looked at her as if she were something miraculous. Maybe she couldn't be what the court wanted. Maybe she'd never fit into their world of politics and protocol. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn to fit into his. "I'll try," she said finally. "I'll really try." The smile that lit his face was worth every risk. "That's all I ask." He pulled her into an embrace, and this time Nadia didn't hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him, let herself lean into his strength, breathed in his scent until it filled her lungs, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she might actually be home. Chapter 4. Over the next week, Nadia discovered that trying to fit into the king's world was far more difficult than she'd anticipated. Her days began with lessons from Lord Benedict on court protocol and etiquette, how to curtsy properly to different ranks, which utensils to use during formal dinners, the complex web of noble families and their relationships to the crown. Her head spun with information she'd never needed before. Afternoons were spent with Counselor Vera, learning about trade routes and economic policy. The woman was brusque but fair, showing no particular warmth or coldness toward Nadia. She simply treated her as she would any student, with exacting standards and little patience for mistakes. Evenings belonged to the king. He would come to her chambers after his official duties were finished, often bringing dinner so they could eat together privately. Sometimes they talked about the day's lessons. Sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence while he worked on correspondence, and she practiced her letters. Lord Benedict had discovered her reading was self-taught and limited, and insisted she learn properly. And sometimes, like tonight, the king would tell her stories about his childhood. "My mother died when I was 7, he said, gazing into the fireplace as they shared the sofa in Nadia's sitting room. "She was human. Did you know that? The court scandalized themselves when my father chose her over several perfectly suitable wolf noblewomen." Nadia shook her head. She'd known the late queen was deceased, but not the details. "She was a merchant's daughter from a coastal town," the king continued. "Beautiful, clever, and completely unimpressed by my father's title. He had to court her for 2 years before she agreed to marry him." "She must have been very brave," Nadia said softly, "coming into a court that didn't want her." "She was terrified." The king smiled at the memory. "But she never let them see it. She learned everything she needed to know about ruling, about wolves, about our ways. By the time I was born, even the nobles who'd protested loudest had to admit she was an exceptional queen." He turned to look at Nadia. "Do you know what she told me before she died?" "What?" "She said the secret to surviving in a world that doesn't want you is to become indispensable. To be so valuable, so necessary, that they can't imagine functioning without you." His hand found hers on the sofa between them. "You remind me of her. That same quiet strength. That determination to endure." Nadia's chest tightened. "I'm not strong. I'm just used to being invisible. Being invisible takes its own kind of strength." The king's thumb traced patterns on her palm. "But you don't have to be invisible anymore, Nadia. I see you. And I want everyone else to see you too." The intensity in his voice made her shiver. Not from fear, but from something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. A knock interrupted the moment. Lord Benedict entered at the king's call, his expression troubled. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. But there's been an incident." The king's posture shifted immediately, going from relaxed to alert. "What kind of incident?" "Lady Celine has called an emergency meeting of the noble families. She's claiming that your attachment to Lady Nadia poses a threat to the crown's stability. Several major houses are gathering in the East Hall as we speak." Nadia's stomach dropped. This was exactly what she'd feared. The nobles were organizing against her. The king stood, power radiating from him in waves. "They're meeting without my permission?" "Lady Celine invoked the ancient right of assembly," Lord Benedict said carefully. "Any noble of royal blood can call such a meeting if they believe the crown is in danger. Technically, she's within her rights." "Technically?" The king's voice was ice. "Gather my personal guard. I'll address this assembly myself." "Your Majesty, perhaps—" Lord Benedict glanced at Nadia. "Perhaps it would be wise to leave Lady Nadia here. The nobles are already agitated. Her presence might inflame." "She comes with me." The king extended his hand to Nadia. "If they're going to discuss her, she has a right to face her accusers." Nadia's first instinct was to refuse, to hide in her chambers until this blew over. But she thought about the king's mother, the human woman who'd faced down a hostile court and won. About becoming indispensable instead of invisible. She took his hand and stood. "I'm ready." The walk to the East Hall felt like a march to her execution. Nadia could feel the king's tension through their joined hands, could see the way guards and servants scattered from his path. This was the king in full power, and it was both terrifying and oddly reassuring. The East Hall was already full when they arrived. At least 40 nobles had gathered, representing every major family in the kingdom. They stood in clusters, talking in urgent low voices that died abruptly when the king entered. Lady Celine stood at the center, flanked by 2 other members of the royal family. Cousins or aunts, Nadia couldn't remember which. Her ice-blue eyes fixed on Nadia with undisguised contempt. "Your Majesty," Lady Celine said, performing a curtsy that was technically correct, but somehow managed to convey disrespect. "Thank you for joining us. I wasn't aware I needed an invitation to address my own nobles," the king said coldly. "But here I am. Speak your concerns." Lady Celine's smile was sharp. "My concern, dear nephew, is simple. You're jeopardizing everything our family has built by elevating this woman beyond her station. The noble families are unified in their opposition." "Are they?" The king's gaze swept the room. "How many of you actually oppose Nadia's presence at court?" Silence. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. A few met the king's eyes, but most looked away. "I see." The king's voice dripped with disdain. "So you've gathered here in secrecy, discussing treason—" "Not treason," Lady Celine interrupted. "Concern. You've been blind for 3 years, Lucien. Perhaps your judgment is—" "Choose your next words very carefully, Celine." The king's power filled the room, making the air heavy. "My sight has returned. My judgment is sound, and I will not tolerate you or anyone else questioning my decisions." He pulled Nadia forward, keeping her hand firmly in his. This woman broke a curse that the most powerful healers in 5 kingdoms couldn't touch. She did so through no conscious effort, no magic, no scheme. The healers believe she's my fated mate, my true destiny. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even Lady Celine looked shocked. "Fated mates?" an older nobleman said. "But she's a bastard, a servant. That's not possible." "Fate doesn't consult bloodlines," the king said, echoing healer Morgana's words. "And even if the fated mate bond proves false, I've made my choice. Nadia stays. She'll learn what she needs to know to function at court, and all of you will treat her with the respect due to someone under my personal protection. And if we refuse?" Lady Celine's voice was dangerously soft. The king smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Then I'll remind you what happens to nobles who defy their king. Your lands, your titles, your positions, all exist because I allow them to. Push me on this, Celine, and you'll learn exactly how far my patience extends." The threat hung in the air. Several nobles had gone pale, but Lady Celine wasn't finished. "You speak of fated mates and destiny, but there's another possibility you're not considering. And what's that?" "Dark magic." Lady Celine's eyes glittered. "What if this woman didn't break your curse? What if she's part of it? The witch who cursed you died 2 years ago, yes. But what if she had an apprentice? Someone who could maintain the curse, then strategically break it to gain your trust?" Murmurs of agreement swept through the nobles. Nadia felt ice forming in her stomach. "That's ridiculous," Lord Benedict said from behind them. "The healers tested Lady Nadia thoroughly. She has no magical ability whatsoever." "That they could detect," Lady Celine countered. "But dark magic is designed to be hidden. Your Majesty, I propose a more thorough examination by specialists in dark arts who can truly determine whether this woman is what she seems." The king's hand tightened on Nadia's. "Absolutely not. I won't subject her to—" "I'll do it," Nadia heard herself say. Everyone turned to stare at her. The king's silver eyes were wide with shock. "Nadia, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She looked at Lady Celine directly. "If dark magic testing is what it takes to prove I'm not a threat, then test me. I have nothing to hide." Lady Celine's smile was triumphant. "Excellent. I'll arrange for specialists to arrive within the week." "Fine." The king's voice was hard. "But when those tests prove Nadia is exactly what she appears to be, an innocent woman caught up in circumstances beyond her control, every person in this room will apologize to her publicly. And, Lady Celine, you'll resign your position on the council." Lady Celine's smile faltered. Those are my terms. You want your tests? You'll face consequences when they prove you wrong." The older noble who'd spoken earlier cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, Perhaps that's fair. If the woman passes the dark magic tests, we'll have no grounds for opposition, and Lady Celine will have overstepped. Grudging nods of agreement rippled through the room. Lady Celine looked like she'd swallowed something sour, but she couldn't back down now without losing face. Agreed, she said tightly. Then this assembly is dismissed. The king didn't wait for a response. He turned and guided Nadia from the room, Lord Benedict and several guards falling into formation around them. They made it halfway back to the royal wing before Nadia's legs gave out. She stumbled, and the king caught her immediately, lifting her into his arms without breaking stride. "I can walk," she protested weakly. "I know, but you don't have to." He carried her all the way to her chambers, setting her gently on the sofa where they'd been sitting peacefully less than an hour ago. Lord Benedict dismissed the guards and closed the doors, giving them privacy. "That was incredibly foolish," the king said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "Dark magic testing is invasive, painful. You could have let me refuse. And let them continue to believe I'm a threat?" Nadia shook her head. "This way, when I pass their tests, the opposition ends." "If you pass the tests," Nadia met his eyes. "You think I might not? I think I don't know what magic runs through your veins, or why it was able to break my curse." The king sat beside her, taking both her hands in his. "What if there's something in you that you don't understand? Something that reads as dark, even if it isn't?" The possibility sent fear trickling through her. "Then I'll deal with it." "We'll deal with it," the king corrected. "Together. Whatever those tests reveal, whatever happens, you're not facing it alone." Nadia wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he'd stand by her even if the tests showed something unexpected. But a lifetime of being disposable made trust difficult. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. "You barely know me. I could be everything Lady Celine says, a threat, a tool of your enemies, someone using dark magic. Why risk so much for me?" The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and cupped her face, his touch impossibly gentle. "Do you want the honest answer?" he asked. "Always. Because when I look at you, something in me recognizes something in you. It's not just the fated mate bond, though I believe that's real. It's deeper than that." His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "You've spent your whole life being told you're worthless. I spent 3 years in darkness, feeling helpless and useless despite my crown. We're both survivors of cruelty we didn't deserve." He leaned his forehead against hers. "And when you fell into my arms and my sight returned, it felt like the universe was telling me something. That sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected places. That sometimes the person you need most is the one you never saw coming." Tears burned in Nadia's eyes. "What if I disappoint you? What if I'm not what you need?" "Then we'll figure it out. Together." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. "But I don't think that's going to happen, because you, Nadia, are already so much more than you believe yourself to be." She wanted to argue, to list all the reasons he was wrong, but exhaustion and emotion tangled in her throat, choking off the words. The king seemed to sense it. "Come," he said gently, standing and lifting her again. "You need rest. Tomorrow we'll face whatever comes next." He carried her to her bedroom and laid her on the bed, pulling the covers over her even though she was still fully dressed. Then, to her surprise, he sat on the edge of the mattress, one hand stroking her hair. "Sleep," he murmured. "I'll stay until you do." Nadia wanted to protest, wanted to say she didn't need a guardian, but the truth was, having him there made her feel safer than she'd felt since this all began. So she let her eyes close, let the exhaustion pull her under, and drifted off to the sound of the king's gentle breathing and the warmth of his hand in her hair, and dreamed of a future where she might actually be enough. Chapter 5. The specialists arrived 3 days later, and Nadia watched them from her chamber window as their carriage rolled through the castle gates. They were robed in deep purple, the traditional color of those who dealt with dark magic detection, and even from a distance she could sense something unsettling about them. Marie had been unusually quiet that morning while helping Nadia dress. The gown she'd chosen was simple white, which Lord Benedict had explained was traditional for those undergoing magical examination. White showed any darkness that might be hidden within. "Are you frightened, my lady?" Marie asked as she finished braiding Nadia's hair. "Terrified," Nadia admitted. There was no point in lying. "What if they find something wrong with me? Something I don't even know is there?" Marie's hands stilled on her shoulders. "Then the king will protect you. He hasn't left your side for 3 days except when duty demanded it. That tells me everything I need to know about his intentions." It was true. The king had been a constant presence since the confrontation with the nobles. He'd taken his meals in her chambers, worked on correspondence at her sitting room table, even fallen asleep in the chair by her fireplace 2 nights ago, when he'd been too exhausted to make it back to his own rooms. Nadia had covered him with a blanket and let him sleep, watching the way the firelight played across his features and trying to memorize every detail, just in case the tests revealed something that changed everything. A knock at the door made her jump. Lord Benedict entered, his expression carefully neutral. "My lady, the specialists are ready. His Majesty requests your presence in the great chamber." The walk felt endless. With each step, Nadia's heart beat harder, her palms growing damp with nervous sweat. She'd never been in the great chamber before. It was reserved for the kingdom's most important ceremonies and trials. The fact that her examination would take place there spoke to its significance. The chamber was circular, with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. In the center stood a raised platform, and around it gathered not just the purple-robed specialists, but also members of the council, several noble families, and at least 24 guards. The king stood near the platform, and when his silver eyes found hers, something in his expression softened. He crossed to her immediately, taking her hands in his. "You can still refuse," he said quietly. "I'll fight them, send them all away. And prove Lady Celine right? That I have something to hide?" Nadia shook her head. "No. Let's finish this." Pride flickered across his face. "You're braver than you know." He guided her to the platform, helping her step up onto it. The specialists approached. 3 of them, 2 men and 1 woman, all elderly, with eyes that held too much knowledge of dark things. The woman spoke first, her voice surprisingly gentle. "Lady Nadia, I am Specialist Morgrave. These are my colleagues, Specialists Thorn and Ashwood. We're here to determine if any dark magic influences you. The process will be uncomfortable, but not harmful if you're innocent." "And if I'm not innocent?" Nadia's voice was steadier than she felt. "Then we'll discover that too." Morgrave gestured to a chair that had been placed in the center of the platform. "Please, sit, and try to remain still throughout the examination." Nadia sat, acutely aware of every eye watching her. Lady Celine stood at the front of the crowd, her face a mask of satisfaction. The king remained close to the platform, his posture radiating protective tension. The specialists began their work, moving around Nadia in a synchronized pattern. They chanted in a language she didn't recognize, their hands weaving intricate gestures in the air. Slowly, a glow began to form around her, pale blue at first, then deepening to violet. "The light reveals all hidden magic," Morgrave explained for the audience. "Dark magic will show as black shadows within the light. Pure magic remains clear." The violet glow intensified, and Nadia felt something strange happening. A tingling sensation spread across her skin, then deeper, as if invisible hands were searching through her very bones. It wasn't painful exactly, but invasive in a way that made her want to squirm away. "Hold still," Specialist Thorn warned. "Movement disrupts the reading." Nadia forced herself to remain motionless, even as the sensation grew stronger, more insistent. She could feel the magic probing into her memories, her emotions, her very essence. It felt like being turned inside out, every secret and fear exposed. Then something shifted. The violet light around her suddenly flared bright white, so intense that people in the crowd cried out and shielded their eyes. The specialists stumbled back, breaking their chant, looking shocked. "What is that?" Specialist Ashwood gasped. "I've never seen—" "It's not dark magic," Morgrave said, wonder in her voice. "It's the opposite. That's pure healing magic, ancient and powerful." The white light began to coalesce, forming patterns around Nadia that looked almost like wings. Beautiful, ethereal, utterly unexpected. Impossible. Lady Celine's voice cut through the odd murmurs. She's a bastard. She can't have healing magic. That bloodline died out centuries ago. Bloodline magic doesn't care about legitimacy, Specialist Thorne said, still staring at Nadia. It passes through birth, not marriage. If her mother or father carried the ancient healer bloodline, it would manifest in her regardless of her status. The king was on the platform in seconds, pushing past the specialist to reach Nadia. Is she in danger? Is this harming her? No, Your Majesty. Morgrave approached carefully, studying the white light with professional curiosity. This is harmless. Beautiful, actually. True healing magic is incredibly rare. There haven't been more than a handful of healers with this level of power in the last 2 centuries. Then why didn't it show up in the earlier tests? The king demanded. Because it was dormant, Morgrave explained. Healing magic often remains hidden until triggered by intense need. When you were cursed and blind, Your Majesty, this magic likely sensed your injury and awakened specifically to heal you. That's why her touch broke your curse. She's a natural-born healer. The implications crashed over Nadia like a wave. She wasn't powerless, wasn't ordinary, wasn't just a bastard servant who'd gotten lucky. She had magic. Real, powerful, valuable magic. Can we verify this? Lord Benedict asked. Test it somehow? Morgrave nodded. Bring someone injured or ill. If Lady Nadia truly carries healing magic, she should be able to ease their suffering. Within minutes, a young guard was brought forward. He'd been injured in training 2 days ago, his arm wrapped in bandages where a practice sword had cut deep. The healers had treated him, but the wound was still fresh and painful. My lady, Morgrave said to Nadia, place your hands over his injury. Don't think, don't force anything. Just want him to be well. Nadia stood on shaking legs and approached the guard. He knelt before her, unwrapping his bandage to reveal the angry red gash across his forearm. She hesitated. I don't know how. Trust your instincts, the king said softly from beside her. You healed me without knowing how. You can do this. Taking a deep breath, Nadia placed her hands over the wound. At first, nothing happened. Then gradually, she felt warmth building in her palms. The same warmth she'd felt when she fell into the king's lap, but stronger now. More focused. White light bloomed from her hands, and the guard gasped. Beneath the light, his wound began to close. Flesh knitted together, the angry redness fading to healthy pink. Within moments, only a faint scar remained where the deep gash had been. The great chamber erupted in noise. Shocked exclamations, whispered prayers, arguments breaking out among the nobles. Through it all, Nadia stood frozen, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. The king's arms came around her from behind, steadying her. Breathe, he murmured in her ear. You're safe. I've got you. I healed him, she whispered. I actually healed him. You did. There was awe in his voice. You magnificent, impossible woman. Lady Celine's face had gone chalk white. She looked between Nadia and the healed guard, clearly struggling to process what she'd witnessed. This doesn't change anything, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She's still a bastard. Still unsuitable. Unsuitable? Specialist Morgrave cut her off. My lady, this woman carries one of the rarest and most valuable magical gifts in existence. Healers of her caliber are worth more than entire noble bloodlines. If anything, the king is too common for her. Shocked laughter rippled through the crowd. The king's arms tightened around Nadia, and she felt him shaking with suppressed mirth. Furthermore, Morgrave continued, addressing the assembled nobles, the dark magic tests show absolutely no taint in Lady Nadia. She is pure, powerful, and precisely what this kingdom needs. Any who continue to oppose her presence do so out of prejudice, not logic. Silence fell as the specialist's verdict sank in. Lady Celine looked around, clearly searching for support, but the other nobles avoided her gaze. Even her usual allies had gone quiet. The terms of our agreement were clear, the king said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "The tests have proven Lady Nadia is not a threat. Therefore, Lady Celine, I accept your resignation from the council, effective immediately." "But," Lady Celine sputtered, "I never agreed to—" "You did. Before witnesses." The king's tone was implacable. "You may retain your lands and title, but your position on my council is forfeit. Be grateful I'm being generous." Lady Celine's expression twisted with fury, but she couldn't argue. She'd been outmaneuvered, and everyone present knew it. With a jerky curtsy that barely qualified as respectful, she turned and swept from the chamber. As the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing with shocked conversation, the king turned Nadia to face him. His silver eyes were bright with emotion she couldn't quite name. "A healer," he said softly. "All this time, you had this gift sleeping inside you." "I didn't know," Nadia said. "I swear, I never knew." "I believe you." He cupped her face in his hands. "But Nadia, do you understand what this means? You're not just under my protection anymore. You're valuable in your own right. Important. Needed." The words should have made her happy. Instead, fear coiled in her stomach. "People will want to use me now. Use my gift." "Yes," the king agreed. "They will, which is why you stay close to me, where I can protect you, and why we accelerate our plans." "What plans?" His smile was gentle but determined. "The plan where I make you my queen and ensure no one can ever take you from me again." Nadia's heart stopped. "Queen? But I'm not. We're not even. We will be." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "If you'll have me. If you're willing to tie yourself to a broken king who's only just learning how to see again." She should say no, should point out all the reasons this was insane. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Yes, yes, I'm willing." The smile that lit his face was worth every risk, every fear, every impossible thing that had brought them to this moment. And as he pulled her close, holding her as if she were something precious beyond measure, Nadia finally began to believe that maybe, just maybe, she'd found where she belonged. Chapter 6. The announcement of their engagement sent shockwaves through the court that rippled outward to every corner of the kingdom. A bastard Omega marrying the Alpha King wasn't just unprecedented. It was scandalous, romantic, and depending on who you asked, either a sign of progressive thinking or the beginning of the monarchy's downfall. Nadia tried not to listen to the gossip, but it was everywhere. Servants whispered when she passed. Nobles debated loudly in corridors they knew she'd walk through. Even the guards had opinions, though they were careful to keep them quiet in the king's presence. "Let them talk," the king said one evening as they walked through the castle gardens. He'd made it a nightly habit to escape the formality of court for an hour, just the two of them among the roses and moonlight. "Words can't hurt you when you're under my protection. Words can hurt even when you're protected," Nadia countered. She paused by a fountain, trailing her fingers through the cool water. "Today, one of the noble ladies called me a jumped-up serving girl playing at royalty. Another suggested I must be using my healing magic to keep you enchanted." The king's expression darkened. "Give me their names." "No." Nadia turned to face him. "Because that won't solve anything. You can't punish every person who questions our match. There are too many of them." "Then what do you suggest?" She considered carefully. Since discovering her healing gift, she'd been thinking about how to prove her worth beyond just her connection to the king. "Let me help people. Let me use my magic to heal those who need it. Not just nobles or guards, but everyone. The servants, the townspeople. Show them I'm not here to take, I'm here to give." The king studied her for a long moment. "You know what will happen if you do that? People will demand more. They'll line up at the castle gates with every illness and injury imaginable. You'll be exhausted. Better exhausted and useful than rested and resented." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The casual intimacy of the gesture still made her breath catch. "You're already useful, Nadia. You don't have to prove yourself to anyone." "Don't I?" She caught his hand, holding it against her cheek. "I'm about to become queen. That means ruling beside you, helping guide this kingdom. How can I do that if half the kingdom thinks I'm unworthy? Then we'll show them you're not. He stepped closer, his other hand finding her waist. Together. But Nadia, promise me something. What? Don't lose yourself trying to please them. Don't become so focused on proving your worth that you forget you already have value, just by being who you are. The words settled into her chest, warm and reassuring. I promise. But you have to promise something too. Anything. Don't let them make you regret choosing me. She looked up at him, suddenly vulnerable. If this becomes too difficult, if the political cost becomes too high, impossible. He leaned down until their foreheads touched. I could give up my crown more easily than I could give up you. You need to understand that, Nadia. You're not a political calculation. You're not a choice I made for strategic reasons. You're the woman fate literally dropped into my lap, and I'm selfish enough to keep you. Before she could respond, he kissed her. It was their first real kiss. Not the chaste touches he'd pressed to her forehead or hands, but a true claiming of her mouth with his. Gentle but insistent, his lips moving against hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. Nadia's hands found his shoulders, steadying herself as she kissed him back. She'd never been kissed before, had never expected to experience this kind of intimacy. But the king was patient, teaching her the rhythm, encouraging her to explore. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nadia felt dizzy. That was long overdue, the king finished, his voice rough. I've wanted to do that since the moment you fell into my arms, but I needed to wait until you were ready. I'm ready, Nadia said, surprising herself with her boldness. I think I've been ready for a while now. The smile he gave her was devastating. Good. Because I plan to do that much, much more often. True to her word, Nadia began using her healing gift the next day. She started small, visiting the castle's infirmary and offering to help the healers with their most difficult cases. An elderly servant with failing eyesight, a guard whose training injury had become infected, a cook whose hands ached so badly she could barely work. With each healing, Nadia felt her confidence growing. The white light came more easily now, flowing from her hands with just a thought. She was learning to control it, to direct it precisely where it was needed. Word spread quickly. Within a week, people were requesting her specifically. The head healer, a stern woman named Alara, had been skeptical at first, but quickly became one of Nadia's strongest advocates. You have a gift, Alara said after watching Nadia heal a child's broken arm in seconds. And more importantly, you have compassion. You don't just heal the injury, you ease the fear. That's what makes you special. The praise warmed Nadia in a way she hadn't expected. For the first time in her life, people looked at her with respect instead of contempt, gratitude instead of dismissal. But not everyone was pleased with her newfound purpose. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lord Aldrich requested a private audience with the king. Nadia was present. She attended all such meetings now, learning the intricacies of governance, and watched the military advisor's careful approach with growing unease. Your Majesty, Aldrich began, I come with concerns from the noble families. Lady Nadia's healing work is admirable, but there are those who worry she's overextending herself. She seems fine to me, the king said, though his eyes found Nadia as if to verify. For now. But Majesty, consider what will happen once she's queen. Her duties will expand dramatically. She'll need to attend state functions, receive foreign dignitaries, manage the royal household. If she's exhausting herself in the infirmary every day, I can manage both, Nadia interjected. I'm stronger than I look. Aldrich's expression was kind but doubtful. I don't question your strength, my lady, but I do question the wisdom of a queen who makes herself so accessible. Royalty requires a certain distance. If common folk grow too comfortable approaching you directly, then they'll see their queen as someone who cares about them, Nadia finished. Is that such a terrible thing? It's complicated, Aldrich said carefully. Familiarity can breed contempt. If you're seen as too common, too available, it undermines the mystique of the crown. The king leaned back in his chair, considering. Aldrich raises a valid point. The balance between accessibility and authority is delicate. Nadia felt a flash of disappointment. So you want me to stop healing? No, but perhaps limit it. Certain days, certain cases. Maintain the healing, but also maintain the distance. He reached across the table to take her hand. I'm not trying to cage you, Nadia. I'm trying to help you survive what's coming. Being queen is harder than you realize. He was probably right. But the idea of pulling back, of becoming less accessible precisely when people were starting to accept her, felt like failure. Before she could argue further, a commotion erupted outside the council chamber. Raised voices, running feet, then a guard burst through the doors without waiting for permission. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. But there's been an attack on the southern border. Multiple villages burned. Casualties reported. The king was on his feet instantly. What kind of attack? Who's responsible? Unknown assailants, Majesty. But they used dark magic. Several survivors are critically injured with cursed wounds that our healers can't treat. Nadia stood as well, her healer's instincts overriding everything else. I can help. If the wounds are cursed. No. The king's voice was sharp. You're not going anywhere near a battlefield. But people are dying. And you're too valuable to risk. He turned to Lord Aldrich. Assemble a battalion. I want those villages secured and the injured brought here for treatment. Your Majesty, Aldrich said carefully, perhaps you should remain at the castle. Let your commanders handle. My people are under attack. I'm going. The king's tone left no room for argument. He looked at Nadia, and his expression softened slightly. Stay here. Please. Let me handle the fighting, and you can heal whoever we bring back. Everything in Nadia rebelled against being left behind. But she could see the fear beneath his command. Fear for her safety. Fear of losing what they'd found together. I'll stay, she agreed quietly. But promise me you'll be careful. He crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. Always. I have far too much to live for now. Then he was gone, taking Lord Aldrich and a contingent of guards with him. The council chamber felt suddenly empty, and Nadia sank back into her chair as the reality of the situation hit her. The king was riding into battle, against enemies using dark magic, and she was stuck here, useless despite her healing gift. Lord Benedict, who'd remained behind, cleared his throat gently. My lady, perhaps we should prepare the infirmary, if casualties are coming. Yes. Nadia stood, grateful for something productive to do. Yes, let's prepare. The next 6 hours were agonizing. Nadia worked alongside Alara and the other healers, setting up additional beds, gathering supplies, preparing everything they'd need for mass casualties. But underneath the busy work, terror gnawed at her. What if the king was injured? What if her healing couldn't reach him in time? What if fate had brought them together only to tear them apart? When the first wagons finally rolled through the gates, Nadia ran to meet them. Injured guards and villagers filled the beds, some groaning in pain, others ominously silent. But she didn't see the king. Where is he? She demanded of the commander overseeing the transport. Where's the king? Still at the border, my lady, securing the area. The commander hesitated. There was an incident. His Majesty was struck by a curse bolt. He's alive, but Nadia didn't hear the rest. She was already running for the stables, her healer's instincts screaming that the king needed her now. My lady, wait, Lord Benedict called after her. You can't go alone, it's not safe. Then come with me. She reached the stables and pointed at the nearest horse. Saddle that one. Now. Within minutes, she was mounted and riding hard toward the southern border, Lord Benedict and 2 guards scrambling to keep up. The rational part of her brain knew this was reckless, dangerous, exactly what the king had told her not to do. But the part of her that had fallen in love with a blind king didn't care about reason. She only cared about reaching him before it was too late. Chapter 7. The southern border was 3 hours of hard riding, and by the time Nadia reached the burned villages, her entire body ached from the unfamiliar strain. She'd never ridden a horse at full gallop before, had barely ridden at all. But fear gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. The devastation was worse than she'd imagined. Entire homes reduced to ash and blackened timber. The smell of smoke still hung thick in the air, mixed with something darker, the acrid stench of dark magic. Soldiers moved through the wreckage, helping survivors, searching for any remaining threats. When they saw Nadia approaching, several moved to intercept her. "My lady, you shouldn't be here." "Where is the king?" she demanded, dismounting with none of her usual grace. Her legs nearly gave out, but Lord Benedict was there to steady her. "The command tent, but my lady," His Majesty specifically ordered. Nadia was already moving, following the direction of the soldier's gesture. The command tent was easy to spot, larger than the others, with the royal banner flying overhead. Guards stood at the entrance, and they looked torn between stopping her and letting her pass. "Let me through," Nadia said with an authority she'd learned from watching the king. "Now." They stepped aside. Inside the tent, Nadia found chaos. Maps spread across a makeshift table, blood-stained bandages in a pile, and in the center of it all, the king. He sat on a camp stool while a field healer worked on his left arm, which was wrapped in cloth that glowed with a sickly green light. The king's head snapped up when Nadia entered, and his expression cycled through shock, relief, and anger in rapid succession. "Nadia? What in the name of— You're supposed to be at the castle. You were hurt." She crossed to him, pushing past the field healer to examine the cursed wound. Up close, she could see dark veins spreading from beneath the bandage, creeping up toward his shoulder. "How bad?" "It's fine. The healer is containing it." "It's not contained," the field healer interrupted, looking exhausted. "Your Majesty, I've told you 3 times. This curse is beyond my skill. It's spreading, and without stronger magic, it will reach your heart within hours." Terror lanced through Nadia. "Let me see it. Remove the bandages." "Nadia," the king began. "Now." She met his silver eyes. "You know I can help. You know I can heal this. So stop being stubborn and let me try." For a moment, she thought he'd refuse. Then he sighed and nodded to the healer, who carefully unwrapped the glowing cloth. The wound beneath was horrific. A burn mark in the shape of a twisted rune, pulsing with dark energy. The flesh around it had turned gray, and those dark veins spread outward like cracks in glass. Nadia had never seen anything like it. Had no idea if her healing magic could counter something so clearly designed to kill. But she had to try. She placed her hands over the wound, and immediately felt the dark magic pushing back against her touch. It was like trying to hold something slippery and venomous, something that didn't want to be contained. "This is going to hurt," she warned the king. "Both of us. I trust you," he said simply. Nadia closed her eyes and called on her healing magic. The white light came immediately, brighter and stronger than ever before, fueled by desperation and love. She poured it into the king's wound, feeling it clash with the dark curse. Pain exploded through her hands, traveling up her arms. It felt like being burned from the inside, like her blood was boiling. The king made a choked sound, his entire body going rigid. "My lady, you need to stop." Lord Benedict's voice came from somewhere behind her. "You're both— No." Nadia gritted her teeth against the pain and pushed harder. She could feel the curse resisting, trying to burrow deeper. But her magic was stronger. It had to be stronger. The white light intensified until everyone in the tent had to shield their eyes. Nadia felt something inside her crack open, a reservoir of power she hadn't known existed. It flooded through her and into the king, overwhelming the dark curse through sheer force of will. With a sound like breaking glass, the curse shattered. The dark veins receded. The gray flesh turned pink and healthy, and the burn mark faded to nothing more than a faint scar. The king gasped, and Nadia felt his relief through their touching skin. Then everything tilted sideways. She was falling, the world spinning, consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. She heard the king shouting her name, felt strong arms catch her, but it all seemed very far away. The last thing she registered before darkness claimed her was the king's voice, desperate and terrified. "Nadia, stay with me. Please, please, stay with me." When Nadia woke, it was to find herself back in her chambers at the castle. Sunlight streamed through the windows, which confused her because she remembered arriving at the border after dark. How much time had passed? She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, Every muscle in her body screamed protest, and her head spun sickeningly. "Easy," the king's voice came from beside the bed. He was there instantly, one hand pressing gently on her shoulder to keep her from rising too quickly. "You've been unconscious for 2 days. The healer said you overtaxed your magic badly. You're all right?" Nadia's voice came out as a croak. "The curse, gone. Completely." He held up his left arm, showing her unblemished skin where the horrible wound had been. "You saved my life, Nadia, and nearly killed yourself doing it." The accusation in his voice made her wince. "I had to. I couldn't lose you. And I can't lose you." The king's composure cracked, showing the raw fear beneath. "Do you understand what it was like, watching you collapse? Feeling you go limp in my arms and not knowing if you'd wake up? I rode back here like a madman, carrying you, terrified every moment that you'd stop breathing." Tears leaked from the corners of Nadia's eyes. "I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just promise me you'll never scare me like that again." He gathered her carefully into his arms, mindful of her weakened state. "I know you're a healer. I know you need to help people. But Nadia, you're no good to anyone if you work yourself to death." She leaned into his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent. "You would have done the same for me." "Of course I would, which is why I understand." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "But from now on, we set limits. No more healing until you collapse. No more rushing into danger without backup. We protect each other, yes, but intelligently." "Agreed." Nadia managed a weak smile. "Though I reserve the right to ignore that agreement if you're dying." "Stubborn woman." But he said it with affection, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Rest now. The wedding is in a week, and I need my bride healthy enough to say her vows." Over the next few days, Nadia slowly regained her strength. News of how she'd healed the king's cursed wound spread through the kingdom, and the last pockets of opposition to their marriage crumbled. Even the most traditional nobles had to admit that a queen who could counter dark magic was valuable beyond measure. Lady Celine, Nadia heard, had retired to her country estate and was not expected to attend the wedding. Good riddance, as far as Nadia was concerned. The ceremony preparations consumed the castle. Seamstresses worked day and night on Nadia's gown. Cooks planned elaborate feasts. Decorators transformed the great chamber into something out of a fairy tale. Through it all, Nadia felt a growing sense of unreality. This was actually happening. She was actually going to marry the king, become queen, step into a role she'd never imagined in her wildest dreams. "Having second thoughts?" Marie asked one evening while helping Nadia try on her completed wedding gown. Nadia looked at her reflection in the floor-length mirror. The gown was ivory silk that flowed like water, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that resembled both wolves and healing light. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever worn. "Not about marrying him," she said honestly, "but about whether I can actually be queen. Yes, constantly." "You'll learn," Marie said, adjusting the gown's train. "Her Majesty, the late queen, she told me once that being queen isn't about being perfect. It's about caring enough to keep trying even when you fail." The words settled something anxious in Nadia's chest. "Did you serve her? The king's mother?" "For 5 years before she passed. She was—" Marie's expression softened with memory. "She was very much like you, actually. Kind, determined, stronger than anyone expected. His Majesty chose well when he chose you. I hope you're right." "I am." Marie stepped back, surveying her work. "And tomorrow, everyone else will see it too." Chapter 8. The morning of the wedding, Nadia woke before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She stood at her chamber window, watching the sky lighten gradually from black to purple to pink, and tried to calm the butterflies rioting in her stomach. Today, everything changed. Today, she stopped being Nadia the bastard servant and became Queen Nadia. The weight of that transformation felt immense. Marie and the other attendants arrived as the sun broke over the horizon, carrying breakfast Nadia couldn't eat and chattering excitedly about the ceremony preparations. The castle was already buzzing with activity. Servants rushing everywhere, guards in formal positions, nobles arriving in their finest clothing. The process of getting ready took hours. The bath, perfumed with oils that smelled of roses and moonlight. The careful styling of her hair, woven with tiny white flowers. The makeup, applied so skillfully she barely recognized her own face. And finally, the gown, settled over her shoulders and fastened with what felt like 1,000 tiny buttons. When Marie held up the mirror, Nadia gasped. The woman looking back was regal, ethereal, beautiful in a way that seemed impossible. "You look like a queen," Marie said softly, echoing what she'd said weeks ago. But this time it was true. A knock sounded, and Lord Benedict entered. He stopped short when he saw Nadia, his usually composed expression showing clear surprise. "My lady, you look magnificent." "Thank you." Nadia's voice trembled slightly. "Is it time?" "Nearly. The great chamber is full. His Majesty is already waiting." Lord Benedict offered his arm. "Are you ready?" Was she? Nadia thought about the frightened servant girl who'd carried linens through these halls just weeks ago. About the woman who'd believed herself worthless, invisible, unwanted. That girl was gone now. In her place stood someone stronger, someone who'd discovered magic inside herself, someone brave enough to love a king. "I'm ready," Nadia said, taking Lord Benedict's arm. The walk to the great chamber felt both endless and too short. Every servant they passed stopped to stare, many whispering blessings. Guards snapped to attention, and when they reached the massive doors, Nadia could hear the crowd beyond, hundreds of voices in low conversation. "One last chance to run," Lord Benedict said with gentle humor. Nadia smiled despite her nerves. "And give up my chance to be queen? Never." The doors opened and music swelled. A haunting melody played on strings and pipes. The crowd inside rose to their feet, all turning to look at Nadia. For a moment, the old fear tried to resurface, all these important people, judging her, finding her lacking. But then she saw the king at the far end of the chamber, standing beneath an arch woven with white roses. He wore formal regalia of deep blue and silver, his dark hair pulled back, those extraordinary silver eyes fixed on her with such intensity it made her breath catch. And suddenly, none of the crowd mattered. Nadia walked down the aisle, each step bringing her closer to the man who'd changed everything, who'd seen value in her when no one else did, who'd offered her not just protection, but partnership. When she reached him, the king took her hands in his, and she saw moisture gleaming in his eyes. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "So beautiful I can barely breathe." "You're not supposed to say that until after the vows," Nadia whispered back. "I don't care about supposed to. I've waited too long to see you like this." The officiant, an ancient priestess who served the moon goddess, cleared her throat. "Shall we begin?" The ceremony was both formal and intimate. Traditional vows about duty and honor interspersed with personal promises they'd written themselves. When it came time for the king to speak, his voice carried clearly through the chamber. "Nadia, you fell into my life when I'd lost all hope of ever truly seeing again. You gave me back more than my sight. You gave me purpose, belonging, love. I promise to honor that gift every day for the rest of my life. To see you, truly see you, for the remarkable woman you are." Tears streamed down Nadia's face as she spoke her own vows. "Lucien, you taught me that I was worth more than I'd been told. You showed me kindness when I expected cruelty. You offered me choice when I'd never had it. I promise to stand beside you, to heal what I can, to love you even when it's difficult. You are mine, and I am yours, from this day until my last breath." The priestess smiled. "Then by the power of the moon goddess and the laws of this kingdom, I declare you husband and wife, king and queen. Your majesties, you may seal your union." The king pulled Nadia close and kissed her thoroughly, not caring that hundreds of nobles were watching. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and when they finally broke apart, both were grinning. "Ready to face them as queen?" the king murmured. "With you beside me, I'm ready for anything." They turned to face the crowd, and the cheers intensified. The king raised their joined hands, presenting his new queen to the kingdom. The celebration that followed was magnificent. a feast in the great hall that lasted hours, with courses of food Nadia had never imagined. Music and dancing that went late into the night. Nobles approaching to offer formal congratulations and barely disguised assessments. Through it all, the king stayed close, his presence a steady anchor. He introduced her to visiting dignitaries, guided her through the complex dance of court politics, and defended her when anyone showed even a hint of disrespect. It was exhausting and exhilarating in equal measure. Late in the evening, after the formal celebrations had finally wound down, the king led Nadia back to the royal wing. But instead of going to her chambers, which were no longer hers alone, he brought her to a suite she'd never seen before. "Our chambers," he explained, opening the doors. "I had them prepared while you were recovering from healing me." The suite was enormous, larger even than the former queen's rooms Nadia had been occupying. A sitting room opened into a bedroom with a massive bed draped in midnight blue silk. Windows overlooked the mountains, and a private balcony offered views of the kingdom spreading below. But what caught Nadia's attention was the smaller room adjoining the bedroom. It had been set up as a healing space with a comfortable chair, storage for supplies, and soft lighting. "I know you'll need to continue your healing work," the king said from behind her. "But I thought it would be easier if you had a space here, where you could treat people without exhausting yourself traveling to the infirmary." The thoughtfulness of it brought fresh tears to her eyes. "You did this for me? I'd do anything for you." He turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. "Nadia, I know today was overwhelming. I know becoming queen means more pressure, more expectations, more eyes watching your every move. But I want you to remember something." "What?" "Before you were my queen, you were the woman I fell in love with. That hasn't changed, will never change." He cupped her face in his hands. "We're partners now, equals. Whatever challenges come, we'll face them together." Nadia rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. Gratitude and love and hope and promises for their future. When they broke apart, the king's eyes had darkened to molten silver. "Should I ask if you're too tired from the celebrations?" "Don't you dare," Nadia said, surprising them both with her boldness. "I've been your wife for 12 hours, and you still haven't carried me to that ridiculously large bed. I'm starting to think you don't actually want to." His laugh was low and delighted. "Oh, I want to. I've wanted to since the moment you fell into my lap." Then he swept her into his arms and carried her to their bed. And Nadia discovered that some kinds of magic had nothing to do with healing light, and everything to do with two hearts finding their perfect match. Chapter 9. 6 months into her reign as queen, Nadia stood in the castle's infirmary and realized she'd never been happier. It wasn't that everything was perfect. Far from it. There were still nobles who muttered about her common blood, still political complications that gave her headaches, still moments when she felt overwhelmed by the weight of her crown. But she was no longer alone in facing those challenges. "Your Majesty, we're ready for you," Healer Alara said, gesturing to the row of patients waiting. Word had spread about Queen Nadia's healing sessions, held twice weekly, and people traveled from across the kingdom hoping for her help. Nadia had learned to pace herself, to recognize when she was approaching her limits. The king had been adamant about that after she'd nearly killed herself healing his cursed wound. They'd even developed a system. If Nadia worked more than 4 hours at healing, the king would physically carry her from the infirmary whether she wanted to leave or not. He'd done it twice, much to the amusement of the entire court. Today's patients included a farmer whose leg had been crushed in an accident, a child with a persistent fever that wouldn't break, and an elderly woman whose joints ached so badly she could barely walk. Nadia moved from person to person, letting her white light flow, easing pain and mending injuries. With each healing, she felt the gratitude radiating from her patients. These were people who wouldn't have had access to powerful healing magic before. People who would have suffered or died because they weren't important enough to warrant expensive treatment. Now they had a queen who would see them. "Thank you, Your Majesty," the farmer said when she'd finished with his leg. He tested it carefully, then broke into a wide grin. "It's perfect. I can work again." "Take it easy for a few days," Nadia cautioned. "The bone is healed, but the muscles need time to strengthen." After the last patient left, Nadia allowed herself to sink into a chair, pleasantly tired but not dangerously exhausted. Progress. You did well today, Alara said, bringing her a cup of herbal tea. 6 healings without overextending. I'm impressed. I'm learning. Nadia sipped the tea gratefully. Though I still want to help everyone who asks. You can't save everyone, Your Majesty. Even with your gift. Alara's expression was gentle but firm. But you can save many. And that's more than most queens ever accomplish. The words settled warmly in Nadia's chest. She was making a difference. Real, tangible difference in people's lives. When she returned to the royal wing that evening, she found the king in their chambers, working through correspondence. He looked up as she entered, and his face immediately brightened. There's my beautiful wife, he said, rising to greet her properly with a kiss. How was the healing session? Good. Productive. And I stopped before I got too tired, so you don't need to carry me anywhere. She grinned at his mock disappointed expression. Don't pretend you're sad about that. I'm devastated. Carrying you is the highlight of my day. He pulled her down onto the sofa beside him. Though I do have something that might cheer me up. What? News from the southern border. The villages you helped heal after the attack? They've sent gifts, food, crafts, even a tapestry made specifically for you. He gestured to a large package in the corner. The letter that came with it said you're the first queen they've ever felt truly cared about them. Emotion clogged Nadia's throat. I just did what anyone would do. No, you did what you would do. Most queens wouldn't set foot in a burned village or spend hours healing common folk. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You're exceptional, Nadia. I hope you're starting to believe that. She was. Slowly, gradually, the lessons of worthlessness from her past were being replaced with new truths. She was valued, loved, important. A knock interrupted them, and Lord Benedict entered, looking troubled. Your Majesties, forgive the intrusion, but we've received an urgent message from the Western Territories. King Aldous requests a formal meeting to discuss border disputes. The king's expression hardened. King Aldous ruled the neighboring kingdom and had been pushing territorial claims for years. What kind of meeting? A summit, here in 2 weeks. He suggests bringing his full council and a small military escort. Lord Benedict's tone made it clear he suspected ulterior motives. It could be a trap, Nadia said quietly. She'd been learning about kingdom politics and recognized the danger. Or it could be genuine, the king countered. Aldous is aggressive, but he's not stupid. He knows I command the stronger army. A direct attack would be suicide. Unless he's planning something more subtle, Lord Benedict suggested. An assassination, perhaps. Or an attempt to destabilize your rule by other means. The king considered for a long moment. Accept the meeting, but double the guard. I want security protocols in place before Aldous arrives. And Nadia. He looked at her seriously. You'll need to be present for all summit meetings. As queen, your presence is expected. Nervousness fluttered in Nadia's stomach. She'd managed smaller political gatherings, but a full summit with a foreign king? That was on another level entirely. What if I say the wrong thing? Make some diplomatic mistake? She asked after Lord Benedict left. Then we'll handle it together. The king pulled her closer. You're clever, Nadia. More clever than you give yourself credit for. Trust your instincts. Over the next 2 weeks, the castle transformed into a fortress. Additional guards were stationed at every entrance. Food tasters were assigned to every meal. The king's personal guard tripled in size. And Nadia studied. She learned everything she could about King Aldous, his kingdom, his personality. Lord Benedict drilled her on proper diplomatic protocols until she could recite them in her sleep. When the day of Aldous's arrival finally came, Nadia stood beside her husband in the castle's main courtyard, trying to project the same regal confidence he wore so naturally. King Aldous was exactly as she'd imagined from the reports. Tall, broad, with iron gray hair and eyes that assessed everything like a merchant calculating value. His entourage was large, at least 50 people, including soldiers and advisors. King Lucien, Aldous said, his voice carrying easily across the courtyard. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. And this must be your new queen. His gaze fixed on Nadia with uncomfortable intensity. The bastard healer who captured a king's heart. I've heard fascinating stories about you, Your Majesty. The casual mention of her origins was clearly intended to unsettle her. But Nadia had spent 6 months learning how to handle such provocations. All true, I'm sure, she said smoothly. Though I find the most fascinating stories are the ones about leaders who mistake rudeness for strength. She smiled, making it clear she wouldn't be intimidated. Shall we begin the summit discussions? Or did you travel all this way just to gossip? Surprise flickered across Aldis's face, followed by something that might have been respect. Beside her, Nadia felt the king's satisfaction through the subtle touch of his hand on her back. Indeed, Aldis said. Let's get to business. The summit meetings were intense. Aldis pushed for territorial concessions, claiming that certain border villages rightfully belonged to his kingdom based on ancient treaties. The king countered with evidence that those same treaties had been rendered invalid by subsequent agreements. Nadia sat through it all, watching, learning. She didn't speak often, but when she did, her interjections were pointed and effective. She'd done her research and could reference specific laws and precedents that supported their position. On the third day, during a particularly heated discussion about trade routes, Aldis made a surprising proposal. Perhaps we're approaching this wrong, he said, leaning back in his chair. Fighting over borders and treaties when there's a simpler solution. And what's that? The king asked cautiously. An alliance, sealed by marriage. Aldis's smile was calculating. I have a son, recently widowed. You have, well, not a sister, but perhaps one of your cousins could be offered? A union between our kingdoms would end these disputes permanently. The king's expression turned to ice. My cousins are not bargaining chips. Everyone's a bargaining chip in politics, Your Majesty. You know that. Aldis's gaze slid to Nadia. You married a bastard for what I assume were strategic reasons. Surely you understand the value of advantageous matches. I married Nadia because I love her, the king said flatly. Not for strategy. And I won't force my family into marriages they don't want. How remarkably sentimental. Aldis's tone made it clear he thought sentiment was weakness. But consider, an alliance would benefit both our kingdoms. No more border disputes. Combined military strength, shared resources. It was a good offer, Nadia had to admit. But something about Aldis's eagerness set off warning bells in her mind. Why was he pushing so hard for this alliance? What did he gain that wasn't immediately obvious? We'll consider your proposal, the king said diplomatically, but no decisions will be made during this summit. The meeting adjourned shortly after, and back in their chambers, the king paced like a caged wolf. He's planning something, he said. Aldis doesn't make generous offers without expecting bigger gains. But I can't figure out his angle. Nadia, sitting at the desk reviewing the summit notes, had been thinking the same thing. What if the marriage isn't the real goal? What if it's just a distraction? From what? I don't know yet. But while we've been focused on the summit, what else has been happening? Where else might Aldis have deployed resources? The king stopped pacing, his silver eyes sharpening. You think he's making a move somewhere else? I think a man who brings 50 people to a simple border negotiation isn't being fully honest about his intentions. The king was at the door immediately, calling for his intelligence advisors. Within an hour, they'd confirmed Nadia's suspicions. While Aldis had been occupying them with summit discussions, his military had been quietly moving troops to their eastern border, far from where the summit was focused. He's planning an invasion, Lord Aldrich confirmed, bursting into the room with maps. Our scouts report at least 3 battalions positioned near the eastern villages. They're waiting for something, probably for Aldis to return home and give the signal. The king's power filled the room, making the air vibrate. He came here to distract us while positioning his forces. And if we'd agreed to that marriage alliance, we'd have been honor-bound not to retaliate when he took our territory. Clever, Nadia said, though she felt sick. Ruthless, but clever. What do we do, Your Majesty? Lord Aldrich asked. If we confront Aldis now, he'll know we've discovered his plan. But if we wait, we don't wait and we don't confront. The king's smile was sharp as a blade. We play his game better than he does. Aldrich, mobilize our forces to the eastern border immediately, quietly. I want double his numbers in position before sunrise. And Aldous? Nadia asked. We let him think he's winning. The king turned to her, and there was something fierce and proud in his gaze. Tomorrow at the summit, we accept his alliance proposal. Let him think we're fools who fell for his misdirection. And when he rides home expecting an easy victory, he'll find our army waiting. It was risky. If anything went wrong, if Aldous suspected the trap, they could end up in open war. But Nadia could see the brilliance of it, using Aldous's own overconfidence against him. The next day's summit meeting was the performance of Nadia's life. She sat beside the king, carefully arranged to look pleased when he announced they'd accept the marriage alliance proposal. Your terms are reasonable, the king said to Aldous, who looked far too satisfied. We'll formalize the agreement and begin arrangements for the wedding. Excellent. Aldous's smile was predatory. I'm glad you see the value in cooperation, Your Majesty. Our kingdoms will be much stronger together. Indeed. The king raised his wine glass. To new alliances. They toasted, and Nadia forced herself to sip the wine even though her stomach churned with anxiety. Everything depended on the next few hours. That night, as Aldous's entourage prepared to depart the next morning, Nadia couldn't sleep. She stood on their private balcony, watching the stars and trying to calm her racing thoughts. You're worried, the king said, joining her and wrapping his arms around her from behind. What if it doesn't work? What if people get hurt because of the plan? People will definitely get hurt if we do nothing and let Aldous invade unopposed. He pressed a kiss to her temple. But I've positioned healers with our forces, and I'm sending you to the eastern border as well, with heavy guard. If battle comes, you'll be there to help the wounded. Nadia turned in his arms. You're going to the border? I have to. I won't send my soldiers to fight while I hide in the castle. His silver eyes were steady. But I need to know you'll be safe. Promise me you'll stay back from the fighting. Let the warriors handle the battle. Only if you promise to come back to me. Her voice broke slightly. We've only been married 6 months, Lucien. I need more time with you. A lifetime more. Than a lifetime you'll have. He kissed her deeply. I didn't survive 3 years of blindness and a dark curse just to die in a border skirmish. I have far too much to live for. They held each other under the stars, neither wanting to let go, both knowing the dawn would bring danger and uncertainty. When Aldous departed the next morning with warm farewells and false promises, the king waited exactly 1 hour before mobilizing. Nadia rode out with healer Alara and a contingent of guards, heading for the eastern border where their forces had quietly assembled. The journey took most of the day, and when they arrived, Nadia was shocked by the size of their army. Thousands of soldiers arranged in careful formation, hidden by the natural terrain from Aldous's forces less than 2 miles away. The king was already there, dressed in battle armor that made him look even more imposing. When he saw Nadia, relief crossed his face. You made it safely. Did you doubt I would? She touched his armored chest, feeling the cold metal beneath her fingers. Please be careful. Always. He kissed her forehead. Stay with Alara in the healing tent. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, you stay there. Understood? Before Nadia could answer, a scout ran up. Your Majesty, Aldous's forces are moving. They're advancing on the eastern villages as expected. Then it's time. The king looked at his commanders. Send the signal. Let them see exactly what they're facing. Horns blared across the valley, and suddenly their hidden army rose into view, banners unfurling, weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. From her position on a rise, Nadia could see Aldous's forces stumble to a halt, clearly shocked by the massive force that had appeared seemingly from nowhere. A single rider broke from their ranks, Aldous himself, Nadia realized. He rode forward under a parley flag, and the king rode out to meet him, Lord Aldrich at his side. The conversation was too distant for Nadia to hear, but she could read body language. Aldous's rigid posture, the king's casual confidence. After several minutes, Aldous turned and rode back to his forces. Within an hour, they were retreating. The king returned to the healing tent, and Nadia threw herself into his arms. No battle. No battle. He sounded satisfied. I explained to Aldous exactly how thoroughly we'd outplayed him. He could fight and guarantee massive casualties for a war he'd lose, or he could withdraw and we'd pretend this never happened. He chose survival. So it's over? For now. Aldous won't try this again. He knows we're watching. And word will spread that attacking us is a poor strategy. He pulled back to look at her. You were right, Nadia. About questioning his motives, about looking beyond the obvious distraction. You may have just prevented a war. Pride warmed her chest, but she pushed it aside. We prevented it. Together. Together, he agreed. As it should be. Chapter 10. 5 years later, Queen Nadia stood in the castle's newest wing, the healing academy she'd established 3 years ago, and watched her students practice their techniques. 20 young healers from across the kingdom, learning to harness their gifts under her guidance. Your Majesty, one of the students called out, I'm still struggling with the bone-mending technique. Could you demonstrate again? Nadia crossed to the practice area, where a volunteer patient waited with an old fracture that had never healed properly. She placed her hands over the injury, letting her white light flow, and felt the familiar rush of power as the bone realigned and strengthened. The key is to feel the natural structure, she explained to her watching students. Don't force the healing. Guide it. Let your magic work with the body's own ability to mend. After the lesson, Nadia returned to the royal wing, where she found chaos of a different sort. Her 3-year-old son, Crown Prince Alexander, was running through the corridors with his nursemaid chasing after him, both of them laughing. Mama! Alex shrieked when he saw her, immediately changing direction to barrel into her legs. Papa said we could go to the stables. Did he? Nadia scooped up her energetic son, pressing kisses to his chubby cheeks. And did Papa mention when this stable visit would happen? Now! Alex declared, with the absolute certainty only a toddler could muster. I said after your afternoon rest, the king's voice came from behind them. He emerged from their chambers holding their 6-month-old daughter, Princess Elena, who was making happy gurgling sounds. But apparently, someone doesn't believe in naps anymore. Nadia traded children with him, taking Elena and letting Alex wrap around his father like a little monkey. He's your son, stubborn just like you. He's your son, refuses to stay still just like you. They grinned at each other over their children's heads, and Nadia felt her heart swell. This life, this beautiful, chaotic, impossible life, was everything she'd never dared to dream of. How was the academy? The king asked as they walked together toward their private sitting room. Good. We have 2 students showing exceptional promise. I think they'll be ready for advanced training within the year. Nadia settled into her favorite chair, adjusting Elena in her arms. And how was your council meeting? Productive. We've finalized the new trade agreements with the southern kingdoms. Lord Benedict handled most of it. He's become invaluable since you convinced me to promote him to chief advisor. He deserved it. Nadia smiled as Elena grabbed her finger. And someone had to replace Lady Celine. They'd learned 2 years ago that Lady Celine had passed away at her country estate. The king had attended the funeral out of duty, but neither of them had mourned beyond what protocol demanded. Some bridges, once burned, stayed ashes. Mama story, Alex demanded, bouncing on his father's lap. Tell the story about when you and Papa met. It was his favorite tale, one they'd told him dozens of times. But Nadia never tired of it, because it reminded her of how far they'd come. Well, she began, once upon a time, there was a king who couldn't see. She told the story, edited for a child's ears, of the curse and the fall, of restored sight and growing love. Alex listened with rapt attention, even though he could probably recite it himself by now. When she finished, Alex looked between them with serious eyes. And then you lived happily ever after? We're still living it, the king said, reaching across to take Nadia's free hand. Every single day. That evening, after the children were asleep and they had a rare moment of quiet, Nadia and the king stood on their balcony overlooking the kingdom, the same balcony where she'd watched stars and worried about war 5 years ago. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Choosing me? A kingdom full of noblewomen would have been easier. Never. He pulled her close. Not once, not for a second. You're the best decision I ever made. Even when I'm difficult? Especially then. He kissed the top of her head. You challenged me to be better, to see beyond politics and protocol, to remember that a king's first duty is to his people. All his people, not just the noble ones. Nadia leaned into his warmth. I never thought I'd end up here. In this life, with this family. Some days I still can't believe it's real. Believe it. His arms tightened around her. You earned every bit of this, Nadia. Through your courage, your kindness, your gift. You're exactly the queen this kingdom needs. We're the queen this kingdom needs, Nadia corrected. Because I couldn't do any of it without you. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching lights flicker to life across the city below. Somewhere out there, people were being healed in the free clinics Nadia had established. Children were learning that bastards could become queens, and a kingdom was learning that true nobility came from character, not bloodlines. What are you thinking about? The king asked. About the girl I used to be. The one who carried linens and kept her head down and believed she was worthless. Nadia smiled. I wish I could tell her everything turns out all right, that she's stronger than she knows, that falling in love with a king isn't the end of her story. It's just the beginning. You could write it down, the king suggested. Your story, so that other bastards, other Omegas who feel worthless, can read it and know that change is possible. It was a good idea. Maybe someday, when the children were older and her duties less consuming, she would. For now, though, this was enough. Standing here with the man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd offered her a choice when she'd never had one, who'd proven every single day that love could transform everything. You are mine, the king had whispered that first day, when she'd fallen into his lap and his sight had returned. But the truth was bigger than that. They were each other's, partner to partner, king and queen, two broken souls who'd found their healing not in magic, but in the simple act of choosing each other. Again and again and again. Epilogue. 15 years later, Princess Elena stood in the great chamber, dressed in the formal attire of a crown princess, and faced the assembled nobles with the same fierce determination her mother was famous for. I've called this assembly, Elena said, her voice clear and strong at 18, to announce my intention to establish healing academies in every major city across the kingdom, not just for those with magical gifts, but for anyone who wants to learn the art of caring for the sick and injured. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some approving, others skeptical, but no one dared speak against her outright. Not the daughter of the king and his healer queen. From their thrones, Nadia and Lucien watched their daughter navigate court politics with a skill that made them both proud. Alex, now 20 and preparing to take the throne someday, sat beside them with a grin. She's terrifying, he whispered to his parents. In the best way. She's your sister, Nadia whispered back. And mine and your father's daughter. Of course she's terrifying. After the assembly, the royal family gathered for their weekly private dinner. It was a tradition Nadia had insisted on from the beginning, one meal a week where they were just a family, not royalty. Your proposal was well argued, the king told Elena. I think you'll get the funding you're requesting. I'd better, Elena said with her mother's determination. The kingdom needs more healers. Mama can't train everyone personally, and the current academy is at capacity. I've already approved it, Nadia said, smiling at her daughter's surprise. Did you think I'd oppose expanding healing education? I thought you'd want to be consulted first. I was consulted. Your father tells me everything. Nadia shared a warm look with Lucien, who squeezed her hand under the table. Alex cleared his throat. Speaking of announcements, I have one too. 3 sets of eyes turned to him. I've found my fated mate. Alex's face was half nervous, half defiant. She's a baker's daughter from the southern villages. No noble blood, no political connections, but she's brilliant and kind, and I love her. Silence fell over the table. Then Nadia started laughing. Deep, joyous laughter that made everyone stare. Oh, my darling boy, she said when she could breathe again. Did you really think we'd object? Your father married a bastard servant. The precedent for choosing love over politics is pretty well established in this family. Relief flooded Alex's face. So I can court her? Officially? You can marry her if she'll have you, the king said firmly. Bring her to the castle. Let us meet the woman who captured our son's heart. As the evening wound down and the children went to their respective chambers, Nadia and Lucien returned to their rooms. The king pulled her into his arms, and they swayed gently to music only they could hear. 20 years, Lucien murmured. 20 years since you fell into my lap and changed my life. 20 years, Nadia echoed. And I'd do it all again. Every difficult moment, every challenge, every fear. Because it led to this. To us. To us. And to them. She gestured toward where their children's rooms lay. We've built something good, Lucien. Not just a kingdom, but a legacy. One where love matters more than bloodlines. Where healing is valued over warfare. Where bastards can become queens, and bakers' daughters can become crown princesses. It's all because of you, he said. Your courage, your compassion, your refusal to let the world define your worth. It's because of us, Nadia corrected, rising on her toes to kiss him. Because you saw me when I was invisible. Because you chose me when everyone said you shouldn't. Because you proved that sometimes the most powerful magic isn't healing or curses. It's simply believing in someone. They held each other as the moon rose outside their window, two people who'd found their healing in love, their strength in partnership, their home in each other's arms. And in the morning, they would rise and rule their kingdom together, as they had for 20 years, and would for all the years to come. Because some bonds, once formed, were truly unbreakable. The end. So, which part moved you the most? I would love to know. And comment below. Do you want more stories with this kind of original supernatural law? Stories where the bond of destiny begins gradually and the characters have to choose to accept it? If you love intense supernatural romances with gentle but possessive alpha kings, werewolves, ancient laws, and happy endings, subscribe to the channel now. We post videos every day, so turn on the bell so you don't miss a chapter. I'm Maggie Reed, and that was another original story just for you. See you next time.